Dragon, my friend, not food.
Shrine keep. Silent, noisy box.
Honor is the soul of the samurai.
Spirit box. Speak true word. Kami speak. Strange magic, not for mortal ears. Strange spirit voice.
Why you show shiny stick?
No hurt, Kami, please.
Japanese mythology, a captivating guide to Japanese folklore, myths, fairy tales, yokai, heroes, and heroines. The study of mythology and folklore is a peculiar one to the extent that we are looking into things which are generally regarded as untrue, yet critically important to a culture. We are also taking on the study of the lore of the folk, and this faces us with the question of exactly which folk we are talking about. Japan, of course, is a single nation, but its origins are so old and often so fragmented that a unified mythology and folklore can be difficult to point to. Still, in all, there are some key texts, tales, and characters we can focus on which will give us a pretty good sense of Japanese mythology. Japanese culture offers a wealth of religious tradition, mythology, and stunning folklore. The earliest myths found in the two main religious books, the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, offer the obscure and often difficult stories of the earliest creation, the birth of the islands of Japan, and the ancestral lines of the emperors. These texts, though distant to a contemporary reader at times, are filled with bizarre stories of the magic of gods. They offer numerous gods for everything in heaven and earth. The rules of the games they play can at times be difficult to understand. Even the importance of numbers can get confusing. Yet, there is a logic to these texts. There is an elaborate code of conduct and an exhaustive lineage which is designed to take the reader up to the historical emperors of Japan. It is probably important to remember as we work our way through these books that, though these are the oldest texts in Japanese mythology, they are nonetheless an amalgam of Chinese and Indian lore, which found its way to Japan and mingles into the earliest beliefs of ancient Japan. If the going gets confusing, it is because the stories themselves are confusing. However, like all mythological systems, it is perhaps a mistake to try to assign a very human logic to the thoughts and actions of deities which precede humanity. The Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki are the holy texts of the Shinto religion, which pervade Japan to this day. Though we can read these texts as mythology and folklore, they are also read by some as religious texts. The Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki are the earliest stories which came to form the Shinto religion. Before delving into the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, it is helpful to survey the basic ideas of the Shinto religion. Shinto is believed to be the indigenous religion and tradition of Japan. As we will see, one of the most critical features of Shinto is ancestor worship, but this is tied to worship of the kami, or, roughly translated, the deities. Since Shinto reveres the natural world as a feature of divine creation, we find kami in every aspect of life and nature. At one time, kami were venerated and worshipped just about anywhere and everywhere. Now one will find jinja, or designated temples, specifically for worshipping specific kami. Kami. Since ancient times, Japanese culture has involved tremendous respect and awe for nature and all features of the natural world. For this reason, just about all aspects of nature are associated with specific kami. So, there is the sun, the moon, and the earth, and there are kami which corresponds to each of these. As we will see in the central books, which form the basis of Shinto beliefs and practices, there are kami for every aspect of life and death. Those who attend death are ugly and terrifying, but this should not lead us to believe that the kami associated with life are completely benign. Shinto religion accepts that nature is capricious and dangerous. What gives us life is the very thing which takes it away. Kami do not exist simply to please humanity and make life peaceful and easy. The karmi of the Shinto religion animates all aspects of life and are therefore an essential feature of things which are unpleasant. The Shinto religion seems to accept that one must take the bitter with the sweet. Jinja. Throughout the Kojiki, for example, we find points in the stories which designate specific geographical locations as the sites where the deities performed certain functions. The gateway to the underworld exists as a real geographic site. Elsewhere, the forms of the karmi designate areas of worship and for performing rituals. At one time, evergreen trees, for example, were decorated to worship and revere karmi of nature and for performing sacred rituals. Over time, these areas have been marked by shrines called jinja. These are primarily temples dedicated to specific karmi. They are the familiar pavilion-style structures so closely associated with Japanese culture. Beyond these ancient texts, which remain significant as religious texts to this day, Japanese culture offers a wealth of other mythological stories. The yokai are Japan's fairies and elves. These creatures are difficult to pin down because they are just as inconsistent in their habits and ways as the fairies and elves from other parts of the world. Yokai can often be extremely dangerous, and the three we will look at are the most dangerous. Yokai can be transformed into oni, or demons, at which point they become malevolent and destructive. Other yokai are merely indifferent creatures who inhabit a space which seems to be just adjacent to our world. They come and go without causing much of a problem, unless they perceive a wrong on the part of the human world. As we will see, as much as Japan keeps the lore of the evilest yokai, there is also the yokai who grant wishes as well. In addition to these mythological realms, Japan also has its store of fairy tales. The fairy tales of Japan follow themes which are at once familiar and strange. The figure of the dragon looms large in Japanese fairy tales, and dragons are not necessarily the fearsome creatures we know from Western traditions. Dragons hold a different place in Japanese lore. They are at times quite gentle, other times they hold the position of the highest royalty. As with the fairy tales we are accustomed to, the Japanese tradition includes tales of simple magic and wonder, and tales designed to teach lessons to children. We will look at just a couple of these stories. Finally, we will look at a hero and heroine from Japanese mythological tradition. England has its King Arthur, the Greeks had Achilles, and the Romans had Ulysses. The Japanese tradition has characters which serve similar cultural functions. As with the other aspects of Japanese mythology, there are differences from the Western myths we may be more accustomed to, but the heroes we will look at are just as brave and majestic in ways which serve the Japanese ideals of heroism. Chapter 1. Introduction to the Kojiki. One of the most important texts in the mythology of Japan, indeed possibly the central text for Japanese spiritual culture, is the Kojiki, or the Record of Ancient Matters. First compiled in the 8th century, 711 to 712 CE, the Kojiki is the text of the ancient Shinto religion and the spiritual beliefs which underpin it. The creation myths, the stories which have shaped mythology in Japan, originate in the Kojiki. The origins of the emperors is found in this text. The emperors of Japan found their roots in the gods who gave rise to the islands of Japan. There are 3 main sections to the Kojiki. The first is the Kamitsumarki. This contains the preface to the Kojiki and the stories of the Age of the Gods. It also includes the creation stories, the creation and founding of Japan and the origin of the emperors. The second section, the Nakatsumaki, begins with the story of the first emperor, Jimmu. This recounts his conquest of Japan and takes the reader up to the 15th emperor, Ojin. Finally, the text traces the reigns of the 16th through 33rd emperors in what is titled Shimotsumaki. The third and final section shows limited interaction between the human world and the gods. The Kojiki mixes the realms of human and divine in a manner we recognize from other mythological systems. The Judeo-Christian Bible offers numerous tales of these interactions between humans and God. The Greeks and Romans built their entire modes of belief and their entire myth structure out of the dialogue between gods and humans. The Kojiki follows a similar pattern, with the gods receding from intimate contact with the human realm, the closer we get to recorded history. The Kojiki, like most other great texts of ancient origins, has a clouded history. Most scholars agree that much of the text is cribbed from Chinese mythology to the extent that China exerted a tremendous influence on early Japanese culture. Until roughly the 8th century, most of the myths and legends of Japan were kept privately by individual families. It was the Emperor Timu in 681 who became adamant on compiling these myths and legends into one text. It lay dormant for 25 years before finally being completed. No matter the various sources, the central place of the Kojiki to modern Japanese culture and modern Shinto practices cannot be denied. The Kojiki stands as a Japanese text. Like nearly all mythological systems, the Kojiki begins with the creation myths. The text begins with the creation of 7 deities. Most agree that the crux of the creation myth begins with the brother and sister gods, Izanagi and Izanami, who set in motion the birth of the lands and the peoples who would come. We are told this brother and sister are granted a heavenly jeweled spear which they dip into the briny water. When they pull the spear up, it drips the brine onto the oil, which was the primal space before the creation of the earth until an island was formed. This is the island of Onogoro, as the text explains. From here, the Kojiki relates the creation of natural forces such as the sun, the moon, the fire, all who are enlivened by attendant gods and goddesses. Most notable of these are the Sun Goddesses and her brother, Susanoo, and the conflicts between the two of them. Susanoo is seen as the rebel in the text, analogous to other rebels in mythology such as Loki in the Norse tradition. He is also referred to as being evil, which would make him something like the devil, except the Japanese tradition consists of other demon characters. It is from Susanoo that the emperor's dynasties are traced. The next 2 sections are more generally concerned with the vast genealogies of royal lines. Beginning with the supernatural beings and tales, the Kojiki recounts the rise of the mythological emperor and empress, Jimmu and Sojin. We read of the rise of the mythological heroes Yamato Taki and Jingo. In all, the text traces the genealogies of 17 emperors over many centuries. There is an entire literature of scholarship on the Kojiki, and you could spend your life studying this text. The importance of this book cannot be stressed enough, since it is one of the founding texts of both the Shinto religion and the origin of Japanese national identity. For the Western reader, it is easy to get confused while reading the Kojiki. The names are unfamiliar and some of the features of the mythology are unknown to us. There is a strange significance to the number 8, whereas in the Judeo-Christian tradition it is the number 7. The tremendous importance Izanami places on her shame may be foreign to some readers. However, there are numerous points of reference which will be quite familiar. The mysterious beginnings of the deities are strikingly similar to the unfathomable origins of gods in other myths. The tension between the heavens, the earth, and the underworld are all familiar to us. And the tricky intelligence of the hero, Susanoo, should come as no surprise. Since the Kojiki contains such a vast amount of information, including long genealogies of emperors, it is helpful to focus on a few of the mythologies included in the text. Of interest is the ancient Japanese story of creation and origins, and the rise of Susanoo, the great hero and trickster of the Kojiki. The myths of origins. Before creation, the center of heaven deity and the reproducing deity existed in the plane of high heaven. Next came the wondrous reproducing deity. These deities lived alone when all creation consisted of the earth and the sea. The earth and the sea were unformed and existed as an oil. The Kojiki explains that the earth and sea floated Medusa-like over the oil. Next came the pleasant reed shoot Prince Elder deity and the heavenly eternally standing deity. This leads to the time of the 7 divine generations, which first are the earthly eternally standing deity and the luxuriant integrating master deity. What follows are the Mud Earth Lord and his sister, Mud Earth Lady. Next appear the Germ Earth integrating deity and his sister, Life integrating deity. Finally, the order of the original deities are as follows: elder of the great place, and his sister, elder lady of the great place. Perfect exterior, and his sister, O awful lady. Male who invites, and his sister, female who invites. These are the generations of the deities who precede the creation of the world. With all the deities assembled, it is commanded that male who invites is Izanagi, and his sister, female who invites, Izanami, are to give birth to a drifting island. These are the two principal created deities. They are given a jeweled spear. The two deities stand on the floating bridge of heaven and plunge the jeweled spear into the brine of the unformed sea. Upon withdrawing the spear, the brine drips down and forms the island of Onogoro, which means self-condensed. This is the origin of the first creation. The islands which would come to make up Japan are derived from this moment in the Kojiki. The journey to the underworld. After the creation of the islands and the things in the world, Izanami gave birth to the fire god Kogatsuchi. In the process, she was burned terribly and eventually died from her injuries. Izanagi buried her on Mount Hyber, and her spirits descended to Yomi no Kuni, which is the underworld. After Izanami was gone, Izanagi missed her and decided to go find her. He traveled to Mount Hiba and found the gates of Yomi no Kuni. Izanami's spirit greeted him at the gates. Izanagi told her they were not finished with the creation of the world. He wanted her to come back with him, but she told him she had already eaten the food of the earth and could no longer leave. She contemplates her brother's visit and words, and says that since he has traveled all this way, she could talk to the Lord of this world. She explains that Izanagi must wait. She explicitly tells him that he must not look at her. After some time has passed, Izanagi became impatient. Breaking a tooth off the comb he had in his hair, he made a torch to light his way and pursued her. He entered Yomi no Kuni and found her rotting. She was crawling with maggots. 8 gods of thunder hung from her body. Izanagi was terrified and fled. Izanami told him, "I told you not to look at me. You have caused me great shame." With this, she ordered the evil hags of the underworld to chase him. Izanagi ran, but the hags started to catch up to him. In desperation, he threw a band from his hair onto the ground, which changed into a grapevine full of grapes. This slowed the hags as they paused to eat the grapes, but they ate faster than Izanagi had hoped, and they quickly caught up with him. This time, he broke another tooth from his comb and threw it on the ground where bamboo shoots sprung forth. The hags paused to eat the bamboo shoots, and again, they were slowed in their pursuit of Izanagi. Izanami, seeing that Izanagi would escape, ordered the gods of thunder and an army of evil spirits to chase him. Izanagi pulled out his sword and swung at his attackers, but to no avail. He ran on. As he approached the gates of the underworld, he came upon a peach tree. Plucking 3 peaches, he hurled them at his attackers and drove them back into the underworld. This time, Izanami herself went after him. Izanagi took a giant boulder and blocked the entrance to Yomi no Kuni, forever separating the underworld from the earth and himself from Izanami. Here they said their final farewells. Izanami pronounced a curse. Every day she would kill 1,000 people from the world for the shame Izanagi has caused her. Izanagi replied that in return he would people the earth with 5,000 inhabitants. They never saw each other again. Izanagi bathed himself to remove the filth of the underworld. In doing this, many new deities were born. Of these, the Sun Goddess Amaterasu came forth as Izanagi washed his left eye. From his right eye, Tsukuyomi, the deity of the moon, was born. Izanagi loved his children and gave them each a realm. Amaterasu was given the heavens. To Tsukuyomi, he gave the night. A third deity, Susanoo, who came into being as Izanagi washed his nose, was given the seas. These new deities were happy with their realms. However, Susanoo was rebellious. He acted out against Izanagi. For this, he was banished to the earth. The wanderings of Susanoo. After he was banished to earth, Susanoo found himself wandering up the river high to the land of Izumo. He noticed some chopsticks floating down the river and decided to see who may have lost them. He finally came upon an elderly couple and their daughter, Kushinada Haim. The couple were crying in despair, and Susanoo asked them why. They explained that their daughter was to be sacrificed to the serpent monster Yamato no Orochi. This monster was foul, with 8 heads and 8 tails, its body long enough to cover 8 mountain peaks. It was covered with moss and trees, and its underside was inflamed and smeared with blood. Susanoo further discovered that the couple initially had 8 daughters, all of whom had been sacrificed to Yamato no Orochi, each year until there were only left with Kushinada Haim. Susanoo told the couple that if they gave him their daughter's hand in marriage, he would slay the serpent, to which they happily agreed. Susanoo set about his preparations. He first turned Yamato no Orochi into a comb and placed her in his hair. Next, he instructed the couple to brew some strong sake. They were to build a fence around the house with 8 gates. He then instructed them to build a platform and place a vat filled with the sake inside each gate. After the preparations were complete, he told them to wait. Susanoo knew that serpents loved sake, and as he expected, each of the serpent's 8 heads dipped into all 8 vats of sake and drank until the serpent was quite drunk. It soon passed out from being drunk. Susanoo watched from his safe hiding place. As soon as he saw the Yamato no Orochi was drunk and passed out, he sprang from his spot and cut the serpent to pieces, until the river Hai ran red with its blood. As Susanoo was cutting the serpent's tail, he struck something which broke his blade. As he examined the cut, he discovered a sword. He quickly realized this was no ordinary sword. Seeing its importance, Susanoo offered the sword to his sister, Amaterasu, the deity of the sun and ruler of the heavens. The sword was called Kusanagi no Tsurugi, or the Great Sword of Kusanagi. This became one of the 3 great imperial treasures of Japan. Having slain the hideous serpent Yamato no Orochi and finding Kushinada Hime safe, Susanoo began searching for a place suitable to build a palace. After a time, he arrived in Suga. Here he decided this was the place where he felt at peace, and he built his palace. Soon after, a large cloud appeared. Susanoo looked up at the sky and recited his poem. Izumi, in a land protected by clouds of plenty, and like this land of Izumo, I shall build a fence to protect the palace, where my wife will live, like the clouds in the land of Izumo. With this, Susanoo appointed his father-in-law, Ashin Nazuchi, to be caretaker of the place. Susanoo and Kushinada Hime lived in the palace at Suga. It is believed that the poem Susanoo recited is the origin of traditional Japanese poetry, such as waka and haiku. Chapter 2. Introduction to the Nihon Shoki. In addition to the Kojiki, the other central text in Japanese religion and spirituality is the Nihon Shoki. This text contains many of the same tales concerning the origins of the world and the gods, but it provides some alternate stories that offer more details on the lives and adventures of the gods and early heroes and heroines. The primary significance of the Nihon Shoki is the lengthy genealogies, which provide the origins of royal dynasties and the divine origins of the emperors. Whereas this information occupies mainly the last 2/3 of the Kojiki, the details of critical genealogical lines would appear to be the primary focus and purpose of the Nihon Shoki. Nevertheless, this text does contain a wealth of mythological material. In the Nihon Shoki, we encounter the same mythological figures. Izanami and Izanagi are present, and their importance to the birth of Japan are identical. Some of the other characters are slightly different. The birth of the sun, moon, and various features of the earth are detailed in the Nihon Shoki, and we will explore some of these stories. We will encounter the hero and troublemaker Susanoo. Only in this text, he appears as Susawono. It is the same trickster figure from the Kojiki. The birth of Amaterasu, Trukuyumi, Sasawono, and the Leech Child. Each of these tales is broken into various versions. Apparently, the oral tradition from which this text was compiled pulled together a wide variety of source material. One may conject that the earliest scribes of the Nihon Shoki deemed all versions of the tale to be worthy of preservation and study. For this reason, they preserved and transcribed the repetition we find in the collection of stories. The following summary is from Section 5, main version. After they have made way for the creation of the earth and the islands of Japan, Izanami and Izanagi made the sea, the rivers, and the mountains. They gave birth to Kukunochi, the ancestor of the trees, and Kusanohime, the ancestor of the grass, who is also called Natsuchi. Izanami and Izanagi spoke to each other and said, "We have already given birth to the 8 island countries, its rivers, its trees, and its grasses. Why don't we give birth to rulers of this country?" At which they gave birth to Oharum no Muchi, who is also called Amaterasu. This is the Sun Goddess. The child was so bright that she shined on every quarter of Japan. Izanami and Izanagi rejoiced at their daughter, and they said, "Though our breaths have been many, we have yet to make one to equal this child. She should not reside in this country. She should be sent to heaven, and she should be given heavenly duties." Using the pillar of the earth, they sent her to heaven. After this, they gave birth to the moon god, who is called Tsukayumi no Mikoto. He shone brightly like his sister and was sent to heaven. They then gave birth to the leech child. Even as he reached the age of 3, his legs would not allow him to stand. He was placed in a boat of hardened camphor and cast to the winds. The next born was Susawono no Mikoto. In another version, he is called Kamasuzana no Mikoto. Susawono no Mikoto was brazen and committed many acts of disrespect. He also had a habit of frequently weeping and wailing. He caused many people in the country to die. He once caused 2 green mountains to wither. For this, Izanami and Izanagi banished him from their realm. He was sent to distant Nenokuni. The story of the comb and the curse. The story of Izanami and Izanagi, in which she is transformed into an ugly demon, and the subsequent journey into the underworld, is retold in the Nihon Shoki, with some differences. It is worth presenting this alternative version since this tale is central to the mythological traditions of Japan. Izanagi followed Izanami to the land of Yomi. When they spoke, Izanami told him, "Why have you come so late? I have already eaten the food of this world. I must rest, so please do not look at me." Izanagi would not listen. He took his comb out of his hair and broke off a tooth. With this, he made a torch. When he looked at her, she was horrifying. Pus spurted from her and maggots crawled on her. For this reason, people to this day hate to carry a single torch at night and refuse to throw a comb on the ground. Izanagi exclaimed, "I have unknowingly visited a polluted land," and he quickly ran away. Izanami said with shame and remorse, "Why didn't you listen to me? Now you have put me to shame." With this, she let loose the 8 ugly women of Yumi to pursue him and trap him in Yumi. Izanagi pulled out his sword, swinging it behind him as he fled. He threw away his black headpiece, and it was transformed into grapes. The 8 ugly women stopped to eat the grapes. When they were finished, they continued to pursue him. Izanagi then threw down his comb, and it was transformed into bamboo shoots. Again, the 8 ugly women stopped to eat the bamboo shoots and then quickly pursued him. Finally, Izanagi pursued Izanami herself, but at this time he was already at the border of Yomi and the living world. At the border of Yomi, Izanagi lifted a giant boulder. Just as the women were approaching him, Izanagi took the rock and blocked the exit from Yomi. He pronounced the oath of divorce from Izanami. Izanagi told him, "If you say this oath, I will strangle 1,000 people from this world every day you are a ruler." In response, Izanagi said, "If you do such a thing, I will cause 1,500 children to be born every day. Do not come beyond this point." He threw down his staff, called Funato no Kami. Then he threw down his belt, called Nagachiha no Kami. Then he threw down his robe, called Wazuaki no Kami. Then he threw down his pants, which are called Akikuhi no Kami. Then he threw down his shoes, called Chisiki no Kami. The boulder remains to block the passage to the underworld. The passage to the underworld may not actually be a physical space, but rather a state or period between when you stop breathing and when you actually die. Amaterasu and Susanoo. This is from Section 5, Version 12. The book adds multiple versions, but this is the central tale. Izanagi decided to appoint his 3 children to rule the various planes. Amaterasu, the sun, should govern the heavens. Tsukiyomi, the moon, should assist in ruling the heavens, and Susanoo would be the ruler of the seas. Amaterasu said from the heaven that she had heard that in the plain country below lives Yukamochi no Kami. She told Tsukiyomi to go and see. Tsukiyomi went to the earth to find the origin of Yukamochi no Kami, who then turned his head to face the country. As he did, grain came out of his mouth. He then turned toward the sea, and all the fish, large and small, came out of his mouth. When Yukamochi no Kami turned towards the mountains, all the animals of the earth came out of his mouth. Yukamochi no Kami then prepared food and placed it on 100 tables. Tsukiyomi became angry and declared, "Filthy and vile, you should offer up things that come out of your mouth to me." Tsukiyomi then drew his sword and killed Yukamochi no Kami. Then he returned to heaven and reported this to Amaterasu. She became angry and told him he was an evil god and she could not look at him. The two spent one day and one night apart. Amaterasu then sent another god, Amano Kumahito, to investigate the matter. However, Yukamochi no Kami was already dead, yet from the crown of his head came cows and horses. Millet grew from his forehead and silkworms sprung from his eyebrows. More millet came from his eyes and rice came from his stomach. From his genitals grew wheat and beans. Amano Kumahito collected all these things and brought them in offering to Amaterasu. Amaterasu was happy with this. She saw that the people of Earth could eat and cultivate them. The millet, wheat, and beans would grow in the fields. The rice would fill the rice paddy. She then appointed a village chief in heaven. The chief began to plant and cultivate everything. Amaterasu put the silkworms in her mouth and reeled the thread, and from this arose sericulture, the contract of Amaterasu and Susanoo. The Sun Goddess knew the evil purposes of her brother Susanoo and was prepared for him. When he came to her in heaven, she made defenses with a 10, a 9, and an 8-span sword. She also carried a holy arrow and a quiver of arrows. She was confident he was coming to steal her heavenly plane, and she met him in heaven to defend herself. Susanoo said to her, "In the beginning I was not evil, and I was pure of heart. I came only to see my sister for a short time." Amaterasu replied, "If you have good intentions, then you will birth children." Then Amaterasu ate all 3 of her swords and gave birth to 3 goddesses, 1 for each sword. In response to this, Susanoo took a necklace of 500 beads of jade from his sister. He rinsed it in the Nuna well of heaven, and he ate the necklace. He then gave birth to 5 male gods. Amaterasu then knew that Susanoo was pure of heart. In return, she sent the 3 goddesses to Earth to tend to the people of Earth. The place where she sent them is called Tsukushi, and is revered for this to this day. Chapter 3. Influence and Importance of the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki to Indigenous Japanese Religion. Japanese religion as it is practiced today is largely a mix of Buddhism and Shinto. The Kojiki exerts its influence as something of a dogmatic text. It operates on the border of the Holy Bible in that it lays the groundwork for Japanese religious practices. The Japanese tradition which comes out of the Kojiki is one of ancestor worship. Throughout the Kojiki we see ancestral lineages traced out. Even in the showdowns between the Sun Goddess and Susanoo, or Susanoo, depending on which text we read, we witness a heavy emphasis on ancestors and lineages. Shinto practices and beliefs still venerate ancestral lines as an integral part of their religious system. The long line of deities which are given in detail in the first book of the Kojiki shows us the importance of ancestors. As the gods split and reproduce, the line of descent is carefully delineated. We should also pay attention to the distinctly patriarchal qualities of these systems. We do, however, still see deeply cherished female deities and figures. Though the male line may be the favored line, the tradition found in the Kojiki places great value on the female. Since Shinto religious ideals focus on the ancestor worship and the male lineage, it should not come as a shock that there is a cult of the phallus in the Japanese mythology. The holy shrines of ancient Japan and to a lesser extent contemporary Japan all contain phallic symbols. It is easy to read this wrong as Western readers, as many other cultures also use phallic symbols. This is not a prurient deification of the phallus. Rather, phallic symbols are holy images of the ancestral lines, which are passed down through the male lineage. Even the creation myth contains the image of a spear, which is dipped into the brine, and then drips the seeds of the earth. These are the kinds of phallic images which are held to be divine in ancient Japanese mythology. Chapter 4. Yokai. In addition to such an essential and unifying text like the Kojiki, Japanese mythology and folklore are rich in tales of mysterious and magical creatures, collectively referred to as yokai. The yokai range from malevolent creatures who cause suffering and misfortune to the merely mischievous, who create havoc, to those who bring good fortune and blessings. Much of Japanese folk tradition is an amalgam of different traditions that have found their way into the lore of Japanese culture. Though changed and suited to fit the unique Japanese traditions and further modified by Shinto and later Buddhist practices, at least some of the origins of the yokai are in Chinese and Indian lore. Though the Kojiki does contain stories of magic, the supernatural, and demons, it stands as a distinct tradition from yokai tales. Much of yokai stories are contained in diverse sources. There is no central unifying text, such as we see in the Kojiki. During the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, Japan underwent an unprecedented time of artistic and cultural growth. There was an upswing in interest in ghost stories and tales of the supernatural that contained demons and benevolent magical creatures. Toriyama Shikin is a pivotal figure in this cultural moment. He recorded a large body of the oral tradition and compiled this in illuminated scrolls. These became a multi-volume encyclopedia of Japanese folktales and folklore. In doing this, he opened the way for other artists to follow suit, and the boom in Japanese folktales began. The legacy of the yokai in the broader Japanese imagination is one of the central features of Toriyama Shikin's work. Stories of the yokai fell out of favor as Japan sought to modernize in the 20th century. However, recent years have seen a resurgence of popularity for yokai. They are now collected in numerous volumes. They have been illustrated in graphic novels and Japanese anime. These sorts of stories, which include fantastic creatures, horrifying and beautiful, are readily accessible to animators and modern storytellers. Yokai come in myriad forms and types. They are analogous to the fairy folk in many ways. Unlike the fairy, they range in importance. Among the yokai, there are three that are widely considered to be the evilest of all. Shuten Doji, Tamamo, Nanmei, and Satuku are considered to be so evil that they are held responsible for plunging the entire nation of Japan into chaos and ruin. The three most evil yokai of Japan. Shuten Doji. Before he attained his status as a legendary monster, Shuten Doji was believed to be a simple if troublesome orphan child. He had a reputation for being extremely intelligent and strong, so much so that many people believed his father must have been a demon of some sort or possibly even a dragon. At a young age, Shuten Doji was sent to be a monk. However, he was not well suited to monastic life. He treated his superior and others with disrespect. He got into fights. Most notably, he had a taste for sake and drank frequently and heavily. This is how he got the name Shuten Doji, which means little drunkard. On one night, Shuten Doji got drunk and decided to play some pranks at a festival. He put on an oni mask, a demon face, and crept around the festival jumping out and scaring people. After he was through, much satisfied with himself, he sneaked away and tried to take off the oni mask. It would not come off. It seemed that the oni mask had become fused to his face. It was now part of his body. When he returns to the monks, he was teased and ridiculed for how ugly he had become. He was even punished for his pranks and told how evil he was. For this, he started to become like an oni deep inside. His heart grew corrupt, and he became full of anger. He finally fled the monks up into the mountains to live as a hermit. In his isolation and solitude, Shuten Doji began to hate the world. He came to embrace his own evil and studied black magic. He started to use his intelligence and his newfound evil powers to attack travelers and merchants. He even kidnapped young men and women, and it is said that he drank their blood and ate their organs. After some time, other demons and evil creatures were attracted to him. He began to amass an army of oni and evil people. As these others spent time with Shutendoji, they too were transformed into Oni. Eventually, Shutendoji and his army built a castle on Mount O. He plotted his vengeance on the world of people. He sought to become the king of Japan. Shutendoji began to attack the Emperor of Japan. Using his mountain castle as a base, he began his attempts to take over and continued to attack more and more. The kidnappings and murders also persisted. Shutendoji had launched a reign of terror. Eventually, Emperor Ichijo decided that Shutendoji and his Oni army must be stopped. The Emperor sent his bravest warrior, Rako, to climb Mount O and bring back the head of Shutendoji. Raiko and his men headed into the mountains. There they found the Oni army inside their castle drinking sake. Raijo and his men poisoned the sake and put the Oni army into a deep sleep. Raiko and his men were able to sneak into the castle. They attacked the Oni and killed them one by one. Finally, they made their way to Shutendoji. Raiko sliced off the Oni Jing's head. However, even in death, Shutendoji was so powerful that his head beset Raiko and his men. In the end, they buried Shutendoji's head outside the city, where it would cause no more trouble. There are many versions of the Shutendoji tale. His malevolent influence and ruinous legacy is an essential myth in Japanese culture and history. One of the most famous is part of a more extensive work called Ihan Haiku Monogatari. This is an illuminated text which contains a full treatise on yokai in general. We may see this as an old forerunner of the manga we are familiar with today. The story of Tamamo no Mei. Tamamo no Mei is one of the most notorious yokai in Japanese folklore. There are numerous stories about her, and she turns up in Chinese and Indian traditions also. She is beautiful but horrifying. Leading orgies and murderous rampages everywhere she goes, she is the sower of discord in every tale associated with her. Unlike Shutendoji, Tamamo no Mei was evil by her very nature. She began as a shape-shifting fox with 9 tails. Her evil and her ambition were unmatched in the world. At one time she disguised herself as a human child and was taken in by an elderly couple who could not have their own child. This couple raised her as their own and named her Mikazumi. As a young girl, Mikazumi showed herself to be exceptionally talented and bright. For these reasons, she attracted the attention of nearly everyone. So gifted was she that at the age of 7, she was invited to recite poetry for the Emperor Toba, who was so taken by her that he offered her a position as a servant in the imperial court. Mikazumi quickly became a star at the court. She absorbed knowledge unlike anyone before. There was not a single thing that was beyond her. She excelled at music, history, astronomy, religion, and Chinese classics. She was stunningly beautiful, and even her clothes were perfect. She smelled lovely. Everyone who laid eyes on her instantly fell in love with her. During a poetry recital one summer, a powerful rainstorm struck, and the winds blew out all the candles in the recital chamber. Suddenly, much to the astonishment of everyone, a mysterious light began to emanate from Mikazumi's body. The people in the audience were stunned and dismayed. Someone declared that Mikazumi must have had a holy life in a past life, and she was given the name of Tamamo no Mei. Emperor Toba, who was already smitten by the girl, invited her to be his royal consort. Not long after this, the Emperor Toba became ill. The emperor's court brought in the most learned physicians. None could determine what was wrong. They brought in high priests and sorcerers. They consulted every source they could to determine the cause of the emperor's illness. No one could figure it out. The sorcerers suggested that someone close to the emperor was making him sick, and there were those who suspected Tamamo no Mei. They suggested that she was a fox in disguise, and that she was using magic to make the emperor ill. But the emperor was so blinded by love that he refused to listen to these concerns. In fact, it was Tamamo no Mei. She was using her evil magic to shorten the emperor's life. It was decreed that a divine ritual would be necessary to save the life of the emperor. Tamamo no Mei was ordered to participate. The sorcerers who suspected her knew if she was forced to recite the magic ritual, her evil magic would be revealed. Tamamo no Mae also knew this, but given her position, she had no choice but to go through with the magic rituals. All went well for Tamamo no Mae, even as she recited the holy words. However, just as she was about to finish the ceremony and wave the magic staff to complete it, she vanished from sight. Thus, the sorcerer's suspicions were confirmed. The emperor, furious over the betrayal, summoned his finest warriors and assembled an army of 80,000 men to hunt down and kill Tamamo no Mae. Reports came in that one of the warriors had spotted a 9-tailed fox in the east. Tamamo no Mae was chased and hunted all the way to the plains of Nasuno. Just before the army caught up to her, Tamamo no Mae appeared to one of the emperor's men to plead for her life. His name was Muranosuke. She cried and told him that on the next day he would find her and kill her. She begged him to spare her. Her beauty enchanted him, and her cries moved him to pity. But he was a man of great honor, and he rejected her. The next day, as foretold by Tamamo no Mae, Muranosuke saw a 9-tailed fox. He shot 2 arrows at it and pierced the fox in the side and the neck. Another soldier, Kazu Sanosuke, swung his sword at the fox's head. Tamamo no Mae fell dead. The army returned to the emperor with the body of the fox as proof they had killed Tamamo no Mae. However, Tamamo no Mae's evil power persisted even after her death. The great emperor of Japan died without an heir. Emperor Toba died shortly after this. The crisis of authority plunged Japan into chaos. Thus, this crisis of power marked the beginning of the rise of the shoguns. Emperor Satoku, or Satoku Tenno. It is officially recorded that Emperor Satoku was the oldest child of Emperor Toba. However, it is also widely known and accepted that he was, in fact, the offspring of Emperor Toba's father, Emperor Shirakawa. Though Emperor Shirakawa was retired, he still held considerable power and influence over matters of the court and pulled the strings where real decisions were concerned. Emperor Shirakawa forced Emperor Toba to abdicate in favor of his son, Shotoku, who was younger and who the older emperor could control much easier than Toba. Upon the death of Shirakawa, Toba assumed the power of the throne. Since Toba considered Shotoku to be an illegitimate bastard, he began his revenge by convincing him to appoint Toba's son as a successor. Toba's son, Kano, was only 3 years old, and consequently he was a puppet of his father, Emperor Toba. With this in place, Emperor Toba forced all of Shotoku's followers to be transferred to distant provinces, and he starved the capital with people loyal to Toba. Emperor Kano was a sickly child and he died young at the age of 17. With this, a power struggle ensued between Toba's next oldest son and the son of Shotoku. By this time, the court was stacked with supporters of Emperor Toba, and his son, Go Shirakawa, became next in line. The following year, Toba died. Shotoku's followers attempted to take back the throne from Go Shirakawa, and a bloody struggle ensued. The rebellion was defeated, and Go Shirakawa's revenge was merciless. He had all of Shotoku's followers executed along with their families, and Shotoku was banished to Sanuki. Shotoku lived out his life in exile. He lived as a monk, shaved his head, and spent his days copying by hand the Holy Sutras. After many years of work, he sent his scrolls to Kyoto as an offering for the imperial temples. Go Shirakawa suspected Shotoku had cursed the scrolls, and he refused to accept them. Instead, they were sent back to Shotoku. Shotoku was outraged by this rejection, and this was the final insult. In his rage, he bit off his tongue, and he bled to death. He pronounced a horrifying curse on the emperor and all of Japan. As he bled, he transformed into a great tengu. His hair and nails grew long, and he never cut them again. Eventually, Shotoku died. Caretakers set his body aside and awaited instructions from the emperor for the proper burial of Shotoku. After 20 days had passed, his body was as fresh as if he was still alive. The Go Shirakawa forbade anyone from mourning Shotoku, and there would be no funeral. The caretakers were taking his body to be cremated when a storm came in. They put Shotoku's body on the ground as they went for cover. As they approached his body, the stones around him were coated with fresh blood. After he was cremated, his ashes rose into the sky and formed a dark cloud which descended upon Kyoto. For many years after this, Japan was racked by disaster and calamity. Go Shirakawa's successor, Emperor Nijo, died at the age of 23. All forms of disaster struck Japan. Storms, plagues, earthquakes, fires, and droughts gripped the nation. So many of Go Shirakawa's supporters and allies died in battle that Imperial Japan itself became weakened. By 1180, civil war had broken out. After 5 years, the imperial court was devastated. The Kamakura shogunate seized control of Japan. It is still believed that all of this was a result of the curse of Satuku. These three yokai are the evilest because the legacy they left was one of upheaval and near ruin. The order of society was ordained by the gods in the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. This order is a divine order, and these evil yokai were so powerful they were able to upset or at least destabilize this order for many years. Helpful yokai. There are many more yokai, and some are quite helpful. The yokai are in many ways similar to the Irish singi, or little folk. They can be utterly evil and destructive. They can also be magical assistants to the daily struggles of the common people. As these tales developed and were passed down through that ages, it is easy to see how some of the yokai came to be magical blessings in a rural life that could be harsh and difficult. Because the cycles of nature, the reality of disease, and the momentary caprice of fortune were utterly mysterious things to people the world over, the Japanese tradition created yokai who could help explain these things. Kudan. Kudan are examples of those yokai who exist to bring good fortune or at least warn of dangerous events. Kudan are born from a cow and resemble calves with human faces. They can speak immediately. Kudan never live more than a few days. They offer prophecies and predictions. Kudan can predict great harvests or droughts. They do not determine the events, they simply predict them. As soon as a Kudan delivers its prophecy, it dies. In this way, Kudan can at least offer people the chance to prepare in the event of something catastrophic. Although certainly much older, reports of Kudan sprung up in great numbers at the end of the Edo period, as the shogunate crumbles and Japan saw the return of imperial authority. It is believed that Kudan predicted Japan's wars of the 19th and 20th centuries. There was such faith in both the existence of Kudan and in their word that newspapers in Japan would claim the truth of their news by saying, "as if a Kudan said." This phrase continues in the common language of Japan to this day. The power and luck of Kudan are such that people are encouraged to wear talismans bearing the image of Kudan for good luck. Hawkers and sideshow would make Kudan mummies from stillborn calves and other animals stitched together and charge money for people to see them. People would pay a small amount to see the mummified Kudan in hopes that they would get some of the luck and good fortune of the Kudan. Amarbi. Amarbi, or more likely Amabiko, are similar to mermaids. They live in the sea and appear in a bright light. They are covered with scales, have a beaked face, and 3 legs. Amabiko are similar to Kudan in that they offer prophecies and predictions. Amabiko have the added benefit of providing protection from diseases. Amabiko seems to have begun making appearances around a time in history when diseases such as cholera was striking around the world. The Amabiko arrived to offer protection. Both the origin of the name Amabi and the variations from Amabiko are unknown. Some scholars believe the Amabiko may actually be copied from other myths and legends from other parts of the world. Japanese history actually records one sighting of an Amabiko in 1846. In present day, Kumamoto, several witnesses reported a strange light out in the sea. Eventually, a government official went out to investigate. He claims to have encountered an Amabiko who predicted a great harvest in the coming years. The Amabiko further instructed him that in the event of an outbreak of disease, everyone should be shown a picture of the Amabiko to warn off the disease. The harvest proved to be a tremendous crop. A picture of the Amabiko was published in the local newspaper, so everyone could see the picture in order to protect them from disease. Jingerheim. Jingerheime are in many ways more similar to the mermaids than the Amabiko. They have the head and face of a human female. Their bodies are serpent-like with fins and scales. They live underwater and rarely interact with human beings. Jinja-hime are servants of the palace of the Sea King. Beyond the differences in appearance, Jinja-hime are strikingly similar to Amabiko. In fact, it is believed that Jinja-hime may be the source for the lore of the Amabiko. One story similar to the one just mentioned goes that a man encountered a strange mermaid-like creature in the sea. It approached him and predicted a great harvest in the coming years, but also an outbreak of cholera. The Jinja-hime also instructed the man to ensure that everyone be shown a picture of the Jinja-hime to protect them from the disease. Kyorinrin. Kyorinrin is a spirit which assembles himself from books and scrolls which are left unread and unstudied. He is made of the pages and words from these neglected texts and creates long extendable arms from the pages of the books. Kyorinrin adorns himself in ornate robes made from the scrolls, which had been left neglected. He also builds a headdress from the scrolls which is adorned with tassels. With his long extendable arms, he attacks those who ignore the magnificent books. Kyorinrin berates them for their choice to remain ignorant. Chapter 5. Japanese Fairy Tales. Like the rest of the world, Japanese culture has a rich tradition of what we have come to know as fairy tales. These tales consist of those cautionary stories designed to scare children or teach them valuable lessons about the world. They are filled with strange magic and memorable characters who are wise and terrifying, amusing and silly, beautiful and grotesque. There are numerous collections of these tales. Illustrated versions are available. With the popularity of Japanese animation, many of these tales are available in comic book collections. Many of these tales are quite old and existed in the oral tradition long before anyone wrote them down. Some tales appear to be for general amusement, and others carry lessons or morals. Yet, as with fairy tales from around the world, the sheer enjoyment we can derive, young and old, from the fantastic stories of magic, strange creatures and monsters, and the unlikely events still entertain us, even if we are not familiar with all the customs evoked throughout the tales. My Lord Bag of Rice. Many years ago lived a warrior who came to be known as Tawara Toda, which means My Lord Bag of Rice. His real name was Fujira Hidesato. This is the story of how he came to be called Tawara Toda. Since he was a warrior and it was not in his nature to sit back and do nothing, he decided one day to go in search of adventure. He strapped 2 swords on himself along with his bow. He then slung his quiver full of arrows over his shoulder and set out. It was not long or far before he came to the bridge at Seto no Karashi, which stretches across the magnificent lake of Biwa. As he walked across the bridge, he spotted a huge dragon. It appeared like a serpent, its body so huge it covered the entire width of the bridge. It looked as if the trunk of a tree covered the bridge itself. One of the dragon's enormous claws was perched atop the parapet at one end of the bridges, while its tail rested on the other. It seemed to be sleeping, although as it breathed, fire and smoke shot out of its nose. Hidesato was indeed shocked at the sight of the dragon. He did not exactly know how to proceed. As a brave warrior, he gave no thought of turning back. At the same time, to go forward certainly meant stepping on the dragon and risking his life. Hidesato saw no choice, so onward he went. He could hear his footsteps as he stepped on the dragon's body and coils. Having made it across, he went on without giving it another thought. As he walked on his way, he heard a voice call out. When Hidesato turned to look, he was surprised to see the dragon had disappeared. Instead, he saw an odd-looking man who was bowing his head toward the ground as if in ceremony. The man had bright red hair that ran over his shoulders and formed the crown over his head in the shape of a dragon's head. The man's clothes were sea green and were covered with a pattern which resembled seashells. Hidesato knew this was not an ordinary man, and he immediately began to wonder what all this meant. How did the dragon disappear so quickly and without a sound? He wondered. Did the dragon turn into this man, and what could that mean? With that, Hidesato approached the man and spoke. "Did you just call out to me?" The strange man replied, "I did. I must ask something of you. Do you think you could help me?" Hidesato spoke. "If I am able to do this, I will, but first, tell me who you are." The strange man told him, I am the Dragon King. My home is in this lake, and I live directly under the bridge. Hidesato asked him to explain the task he required, and the Dragon King explained, I want you to kill my greatest enemy, the centipede who lives just beyond here on the mountain. He continued, I have lived in this lake for many years. I now have many children and grandchildren. For years now we have lived in terror because the monster centipede comes down from the mountain night after night and steals off with a member of my family. If this continues for much longer, it will take all my children and will surely come for me. The situation is so dire, I decided to ask the help of a human. For many days I waited on the bridge in the shape of a terrifying dragon. Everyone who approached ran away in horror. You were the first mortal who has been able to look at me and pass over without fear. Will you please help me destroy the centipede? Hidesato was moved by the story, and he promised the strange man that he would help him if he could. Hidesato asked the Dragon King where he could find the centipede. The Dragon King explained that it lived high atop Mount Mikimi. That the centipede came to the lake every night at a specific time. It would be better to wait for it. So the Dragon King invited Hidesato to this palace. As he descended into the lake, the water parted. Though he was conducted deep into the lake, nothing ever dampened him or his clothes. Hidesato had heard the stories of the Sea King who lived in a magnificent palace, served by the fish of the sea, but nothing prepared Hidesato for the beauty of the Dragon King's palace. White marble walls made up the palace at the heart of Lake Biwa. There in attendance were all of the fish of the lake. Goldfish, red carp, and silver trout made up the retinue of servants who attended the Dragon King and his guest. Hidesato was amazed at the banquet which was laid before them. They were served crystallized lotus flowers. They ate with chopsticks made from ebony. As they ate, the sliding doors opened and 10 beautiful goldfish dancers entertained them. 10 red carp musicians played the koto and the samisen. They forgot all about the centipede as the feast and the entertainment went on until midnight. The Dragon King was about to raise a glass of wine in honor of the warrior when they heard the thunderous footsteps of what sounded like an invading army. Hidesato and the Dragon King ran to their balcony, and they could see far off, coming down a mountain, 2 glowing balls of fire. The Dragon King shook with fear. The Dragon King cried out, It is the centipede. It is coming for its prey. Now is the time to strike and kill it. Hidesato looked out at the sight, straining his eyes. He could see just beyond the balls fire the body of an enormous centipede. Its body wound down the mountain, and its many legs and feet glowed like lanterns in the sky. Hidesato displayed no signs of fear. He attempted to calm the Dragon King. Fear not, I will kill the centipede. Bring me my bow and quiver. The Dragon King brought him his bow and quiver. Hidesato was surprised to see that he only had 3 arrows left in his quiver. Hidesato put an arrow in place and let it fly. To his shock, the arrow struck the centipede right between the eyes, but it bounced off its armored body without harming it. Undaunted, he fitted another arrow in place. This too he let fly. This struck the centipede in the center of its head, but this one also bounced off without harming the centipede. The centipede could not be hurt with weapons. The Dragon King saw this and became despondent. Hidesato had 1 arrow left in his quiver. If he failed to stop the centipede with this arrow, it would surely make its way to the lake. It had wrapped its huge body around the mountain 7 times. The light from its 100 feet was reflected in the waters of the lake. It was getting close. Hidesato thought for a moment and remembered that he was once heard that human saliva was deadly to centipedes. He worried, though, that this was not an ordinary centipede. It was a monster that made him cringe at the sight of it. He knew this was his last chance. Taking the arrow out of the quiver, he put it in his mouth. He let the arrow fly. The arrow struck the centipede in the middle of its head, and this time it punctured the skull right into the brain. The creature stopped still. It let out a horrifying shudder as the fire of its eyes dimmed. The 100 feet also dimmed to darkness. As the light faded, the entire sky fell dark. Lightning flashed, and storm winds whipped as if the world itself was ending. The Dragon King and his children, all the servants, and all the entertainers cowered in fear as the palace itself shook. At last, the day dawned, and the centipede was gone from the mountain. Hidesato hailed the Dragon King and invited him to come to the balcony and see for himself. The centipede was in fact dead. At this, all the inhabitants of the palace rejoiced. Hidesato pointed to the body of the centipede that was floating in the lake as it painted the waters red with its blood. The Dragon King was so grateful that he could not contain himself. His entire family bowed before Hidesato and called him the bravest warrior in all Japan. The king prepared another feast to thank the warrior. All kinds of fish was prepared, stewed, boiled, roasted, and raw. Dishes made from the finest coral and crystal were laid out for the feast. The Dragon King served the most exquisite wine Hidesato had ever tasted. That day, the sun shined on the kingdom, and the lake like it had never shined before. The king did not want Hidesato to leave, and tried to persuade him to stay. Hidesato told the king that he must leave. He had accomplished the adventures he had set out to find. The Dragon King and his family were sorry to see him go, and in their gratitude the king and his family gave the departing warrior gifts for delivering them from the terrors of the centipede. As Hidesato stood to leave, a line of servant fish appeared. Dressed in elegant ceremonial robes, they laid out the gifts from the Dragon King. First, a bronze bell. Second, a bag of rice. Third, a roll of silk. Fourth, a cooking pot. Fifth, a bell. At first, Hidesato tried to refuse the gifts politely, but the Dragon King insisted. Hidesato did not wish to offend the king's generosity and graciously accepted the gift. An entourage of servants was appointed to transport the donations to Hidesato's home. When he was gone, the servants of Hidesato's household wondered where he had gone. They were concerned, but concluded that he must have been waylaid by the storm the previous night. When the servants saw Hidesato returning, they were amazed at the sight of the large procession which accompanied him. They announced to the household that he had returned. As soon as the Dragon King's men put down the gifts at Hidesato's step, they completely disappeared. Hidesato recounted all that had happened to his household. They were amazed at the tale. As it turned out, all of the gifts from the Dragon King had magic power. Only the bell turned out to be ordinary, and Hidesato presented it to a nearby temple so that it could be rung at each hour of the day. The bag of rice was inexhaustible. No matter how much the warrior and his family took out of the bag, it always remained full. The roll of silk never ran out. Again and again they cut off pieces to make suits of clothes, and always the roll of silk remained. The cooking pot made the most sumptuous food. Everything cooked in it became delicious, and it cooked without the need of fire. Hidesato became known throughout Japan. Because he never needed food, fire, or clothes, he eventually became very rich. Because of this, he eventually became known as My Lord Bag of Rice. The story of Urashima Taro. In ancient times, in the province of Tango, there was a young fisherman who lived in a fishing village of Mizunoye. His name was Urashima Taro. Urashima Taro was the son of a fisherman, and the skills he learned from his father had more than doubled in him. Urashima Taro was the most skilled fisherman in that part of Japan, and could catch more bonita and tai in one day than the other fishermen could catch in a week. Although he was highly regarded for his fishing skills, he was more well known for his kind heart. He never hurt anyone or anything. No creature was too small for his kindness. Even when he was a boy, his friends would make fun of him, because he would not join in when the other boys were teasing small animals. He wanted no part of this kind of cruelty. One evening, as he made his way home from a day of fishing, he heard a great fuss from a crowd of children. He checked to see what the noise was about and discovered that a group of kids were tormenting a tortoise. One boy pulled the tortoise around, another boy pulled the tortoise in the other direction, another boy beat the animal with a stick, while still another pelted it with a rock. Urashima immediately felt pity for the tortoise and called out to the children, "Stop tormenting that animal," he said. "If you keep it up, it will die." The boys did not care. They were at an age at which cruelty was all too common amongst boys. One of the older boys answered Urashima, "Who cares if it lives or dies? We don't care. We will do as we please." And so, the boys went on with their torments of the tortoise. They were crueler than before. Urashima thought about how to deal with the boys, and decided that maybe he could convince them to give him the tortoise. He smiled at them and spoke, You boys must be getting tired of this. Why don't you give me the tortoise? I would love to have it and take it home." The boys refused and said, "Why should we give you the tortoise? We caught it and it is ours." Urashima replied, "Obviously this is true. You caught the tortoise and I'm not asking you to give it to me for free. I will buy the tortoise from you with money. What do you think about that?" Urashima held up a string that held several coins, threaded through the center. He went on, "Look at these coins. You could buy anything you want with this money. It's worth much more than that old tortoise. Now be good sports and sell the tortoise to me." The fact is, the boys were not bad after all. They were just mischievous boys, and soon Urashima won them over. His kind words and gentle smile persuaded them to be of his spirit, as the Japanese expression goes. Eventually, the eldest boy offered up the tortoise. "All right then, Oji-san," which means uncle, "you can have the tortoise if you hand over the money," said one of the boys. Urashima handed them the coins, and the boys gave him the tortoise. Excited with their newly acquired riches, they quickly ran off. Urashima held the tortoise and spoke to it, saying, "Poor thing, you are safe with me. I have heard that the stork lives for 1,000 years, but the tortoise lives for 10,000 years. How close you came to having that long life cut far too short. If I had not been passing by, those boys would have surely killed you just for fun. Now, I will take you to the sea, so you may find your way home. Be careful you do not get caught again. I may not be there to save you next time." Urashima took the tortoise to the edge of the sea and released it. He watched as the creature slowly disappeared. As the sun was setting, he realized he was tired and went home. The next day, Urashima was in his boat fishing as usual. It was a fine morning. The weather was perfect with a beautiful blue sky above. In the morning, he sailed into the sea. He threw his line into the water and continued passing the other fishermen as he drifted further out into the calm waters. Urashima could not help reflecting on the tortoise from the day before. He wondered to himself how nice it would be to live for thousands of years, just like the tortoise. As he was lost in his daydreams, he suddenly heard a voice call out his name, "Urashima, Urashima." It was a soft and clear voice beckoning over the water. Urashima stood up to see who was calling his name and where the voice was coming from all the way out there in the sea. He could not see another boat anywhere he looked. There was no sign of another person anywhere. He appeared to be all alone. This startled him at first. As he looked to the side of the boat, he spotted a tortoise. It was the same tortoise from the day before. Urashima spoke. Well, little tortoise, was it you who just called out to me?" The tortoise nodded his head and said, "Indeed, it was I who spoke to you. Yesterday, Okagi-sama Day, which means thanks to you, or in your honorable shadow, my life was spared. I come to you now to thank you, and to offer my gratitude for your kindness and generous spirit." Urashima replied, "This is kind of you. Come up to my boat. I would offer you a smoke, but since you're a tortoise, I am sure you do not smoke." Urashima laughed at this. The tortoise laughed and said, "I would love some sake. It is my favorite. But you are right, I do not smoke." Urashima then told the tortoise, "I do apologize. I have no sake with me, but come onto my boat and dry yourself in the sun." The tortoise climbed into the boat with a little help from Urashima. As he made himself comfortable in the warm sun, he asked Urashima, "Urashima, have you seen the palace of Rinjin, the Dragon King of the Sea?" Urashima replied, "No. I have often heard of the Dragon King's realm under the sea, and though I have spent many years on the sea, I have never seen the palace of Rinjin with my own eyes. It must be far away. I wonder if it exists at all." "So you have never been to the Sea King's palace?" said the tortoise. "Then you have not seen one of the most magnificent sights in the universe. It is indeed far under the sea, but I know the way, and I can take you there. If you would like to see the Sea King's realm, I will guide you there." To which Urashima said, "I would love to go there, and it is so kind of you to offer to guide me. But you must understand that I am a mortal man. I'm not able to swim in the sea the way you can." The tortoise stopped him and spoke, "Think nothing of this. You will not have to swim at all. You can ride on my back all the way there." Urashima looked at the tortoise and saw his small size. He said, "How can it be possible for me to fit on your back? You are so small." The tortoise simply explained, "Just give it a try, and you will see." When the tortoise had spoken these last words, Urashima gave him a second look. The tortoise had grown large enough for a full-sized man to sit on his back. Urashima said to himself, "This is indeed strange, but all right." The tortoise behaved as if nothing was out of the ordinary and said, "Whenever you are ready, we will set off." With that, he leaped into the sea, carrying Urashima on his back. Down they went, deeper and deeper into the sea. Not only did Urashima not grow tired, but he also did not even get wet from the sea. After a long journey, Urashima spotted in the distance a magnificent gate. Behind the gate, he could see the rooftops of a breathtaking palace. Urashima spoke with excitement. "This looks like the gate to some tremendous palace. Tortoise, what is this marvelous place?" The tortoise answered, "This is the gate of the Rinjin Palace. Beyond that, the large rooftop you see is the palace of the Sea King himself." "So, we have arrived at the palace of the Sea King," said Urashima. He was utterly amazed. The tortoise answered him, "We have arrived. That was fast, don't you think? You must kindly walk from this point." The tortoise approached the gate and spoke to Fish, who was the gatekeeper. "This is Urashima Taro from the country of Japan. I have brought him to the palace of the Sea King as a guest. Will you kindly show him in?" All the vassals of the king came out to greet Urashima. The red bream, the flounder, the sole, the cuttlefish all offered courtly bows to the guest. They bade him welcome and said, "Urashima-sama, welcome to the Sea Palace, the home of the Dragon King of the Sea. You are most welcome. We are honored to have a guest from such a far-off country. And you, Mr. Tortoise, we are grateful to you for guiding Urashima here. Follow us and allow us to be your guides." Urashima was just a poor fisherman. He did not know the proper way to behave in such a grand palace. However, he felt welcome and at ease, and followed his guides to the inner palace. When he reached the entryway, he was greeted by a princess. She was stunning, more beautiful than any human. Her dress was in a red and soft green color that reminded Urashima of the underside of a wave. Their golden threads were woven through her gown, which shimmered as he looked. Her hair was black, and it streamed over her shoulders like a princess from ages ago. Her voice was like water music. Her beauty and majesty completely struck Urashima. In his amazement, Urashima almost forgot to bow to the lady, but as soon as he made ready to bow, she took him by the hand and led him to the place of honor at the upper end of the hall. She asked him to be seated. The princess spoke, "Urashima Taro, it is a great honor and pleasure to welcome you to my father's palace. Yesterday you saved the life of a tortoise. I was that very tortoise, and I have sent for you to thank you. If you like, you may live here forever, and I will be your bride. It is forever summer in this kingdom, and there is no sorrow here. You will live in eternal youth, and we will live in happiness forever." Urashima was amazed by her words and the sound of her voice. He was filled with wonder and joy, and he thought he had to be dreaming. At last, he answered, "I thank you many times for your kindness. I would like nothing more than to stay in this magnificent place. Until today, I have only heard distant tales of this kingdom. I have no words for what I have seen here." As he was speaking, a great train of royal servants assembled. They were all dressed in the most exquisite ceremonial clothes, and bearing great trays made of coral, filled with the most delicious foods. Fish and seaweed, the kinds of things he had only dreamed of before. They laid all this out in front of the bride and bridegroom. Everything was celebrated with amazing splendor. The entire realm of the Sea King rejoiced. The pair made their vows 3 times with the wedding cup. Music began to play, and gold and silver fish came out of the waves and began to dance. Urashima had never known such happiness. Nothing in his life prepared him for the joy of this moment. When everything settled down, the princess asked Urashima if he would like to walk around the palace and see all the kingdom. He followed the princess as she showed him around the palace. The walls were made of coral and inlaid with pearls. There were wonders everywhere he looked that exceeded his words. He could not even begin to describe what he saw. This was a kingdom of eternal youth and happiness. Possibly most amazing to Urashima was the garden, which displayed all 4 seasons at the same time. Winter, spring, summer, and autumn could be seen all at once. In one direction he saw plum and cherry trees in spring bloom. Butterflies flew from flower to flower while nightingales sang. In another direction he saw the lush green of summer. He could hear cicada from the day and the cricket from the night. Still, in another direction, Urashima saw the glorious leaves of autumn. Magnificent chrysanthemums were in bloom. At last, he looked to the north, where he saw the slivery snows of winter. The trees and bamboo were covered with snow, and before his eyes he could see a frozen pond. Each passing day brought more wonders and dazzled him with happiness. After 3 days, though, he began to remember who he was and where he was from. He started to remember all he left behind, his parents and his own country. He began to think he did not really belong in the kingdom of the Sea King. He finally said to himself, I do not think I can stay here. I have an old mother and an old father at home. What will become of them in my absence? They must be worried sick. I must go home before another day passes. With that, he hurriedly began to prepare himself to go home. He then went to his beautiful wife, the princess. He bowed low before her and spoke. Princess, I have been exceedingly happy here with you. You have been so kind to me. However, I have to say goodbye to you and return to my own country and my parents. Princess Ottoheim began to weep. She spoke in a soft voice. I fear you are not happy here. Why else would you wish to leave me so soon? Why are you in such a hurry? Please stay one more day. Even as she spoke, as beautiful as he found her plea, he remembered his parents. His duty to his parents was stronger than any pleasure or any love. It could not be moved. Urashima answered her, I am sorry, my princess. I do not wish to leave you. You must not think that. It is that I must go to my parents. Just let me go for one day, and I promise I will return to you. Though she was indeed sad, she said to him, Then there is nothing I can do. I will let you go to your father and mother this very day. Instead of keeping you with me one more day, I will send you home for one day. First, let me give you this token of our love to take back with you. She gave him a beautiful lacquered box. It has a silk cord tied around it with tassels of red silk. Urashima received the gift, but he had second thoughts about taking it. He said to the princess, It does not seem fitting that I should still take more gifts after all you have given me. But I do not wish to dishonor you, and so I will take it. Then he thought for a moment and asked, Please tell me what is in the box. The princess answered him, It is the Tamate Bako, the box of the jewel hand. It contains something extremely valuable and precious. You must not open the box no matter what, or else something terrible will happen to you. Please promise me you will not open the box. Urashima promised her he would not open the box. He then walked down to the shore where a large tortoise awaited him. Mounting the tortoise's back, he was carried away just as he had come. As he left, he looked back and bade farewell to Princess Ottoheim until he could no longer see her. Then he made ready to return home to his own country. The tortoise carried him to the familiar shore. The Urashima stepped off. He watched as the tortoise swam away toward the kingdom of the Sea King. As Urashima looked around, a strange feeling came over him. He looked at the people as they passed by, and he examined how they looked at him. He noticed how they stared at him so strangely. Everything looked the same. The shore and the mountains were familiar, but the people acted as if they did not recognize him, and he did not know any of their faces. In his amazement, he walked home to his parents. He called out, Father, Mother, I have returned. Just then he saw a strange man come out of the house. He thought to himself, his parents must have moved while he was gone. He began to feel very nervous, and he did not know why. Begging the strange man's pardon, Urashima asked him, Until just a few days ago I lived in this house. My name is Urashima Taro. Do you know where my parents have gone? The strange man looked very confused. He looked at Urashima and said, You are Urashima Taro? I am he, said Urashima. The man laughed and said, You are not very good at telling jokes. There was a Urashima Taro who lived in this village, but that story is over 300 years old. It is not possible that he is alive today. Urashima heard this and was frozen with horror. He spoke again to the man. Please believe me, I am Urashima Taro. I am astounded by this. I left this very spot no more than 4 or 5 days ago. Please tell me what I want to know. The man then grew serious. Maybe you are Urashima Taro, but the Urashima Tamo I know lived 300 years ago. Are you his spirit returns to visit the old home? Urashima became somewhat desperate. He says, Of course I am not a spirit. I am alive before you. Look at my feet. He stomped the ground to show the man, because Japanese ghosts do not have feet. The man replied, All I know is that Urashima Taro lived 300 years ago. You can read it yourself in the chronicles of the village. Urashima was bowled over. He was filled with shock and horror. Even as he looked around, everything looked just a little bit different than he remembered. He came to the terrible realization that what the man told him was true. He felt as if he was in a dream. He started to realize the few days he had spent in the palace of the Sea King had not been days at all. Each day must have been 100 years. His parents had died many years ago while he was gone, and so did everyone he ever knew. They must have written down his story. He knew he could not stay, that he had to get back to his wife, the princess, in the palace of the Sea King. He made his way to the shore. In his hand, he held the box the princess had given him. He did not know which way to go. He then remembered the box, the tamate bako. He remembered what the princess had told him, that he was never to open the box, because it contained something very precious and very dangerous. But he said to himself, even though he knew he was disobeying the princess's one command, he still persuaded himself he was doing the right thing. Ever so slowly, he loosened the silk and the red silk cords and opened the precious lacquer box. Out of the box came a full soft cloud and 3 wisps of cloud with it. For just a moment he covered his face. The cloud hung in the air for just a moment, and then he floated away over the sea. Until that moment, Urashima was young and filled with life. He was only 24 years old. But then, suddenly, his hair turned snowy white. His back bent over, his body withered, and he fell down dead on the shore of the sea. Because of this simple act of disobedience, Urashima would never return to the Sea King's realm and join his princess. The elders who tell this tale explain to children to never be disobedient to those who are wiser. You may become withered like Urashima from a simple act of disobedience. Chapter 6. Folk Heroes and Heroines. The folk heroes and heroines of Japan are too numerous to name. They come from the ancient texts discussed at the beginning of this book and from various folk sources around Japan. Some of the figures persist in the imagination of the Japanese people to this day and have found new life in manga and video games. We will look at just 2 examples. It is important to note that some of the actions of these heroes may seem odd or unfamiliar to us because the virtues they embody are foreign to us today. Suffice to say that both of the examples below are revered national heroic symbols in Japan that behave according to the honorable virtues of the home and the court. They are figures to be admired, and these stories remain a part of the Japanese imagination because the actions of these heroes are to be emulated. The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter and Kaguya Hime. Once, a long time ago, an old bamboo cutter named Taketori was out cutting bamboo, and as he cut open a shining stalk of bamboo, he discovered a small baby girl inside of it, no larger than his thumb. He and his wife were childless, so he decided to take her home, where he and his wife would raise her as their own. They named her Kaguya Hime, which means child of the supple bamboo. As the child grew, he found that every time he would go to cut bamboo and cut open a shining stalk, he would find a small lump of gold. He and his wife soon became extremely rich. The child eventually grew to be a normal-sized young woman, but she was extraordinarily beautiful. Taketori tried to keep everything secret. Eventually, word got around as to the stunning beauty of Kaguya Hime. In time, 5 princes arrived at the home of Taketori to ask him for his daughter's hand in marriage. They begged him until he finally relented and instructed Kaguya Hime to choose one of the princes. Kaguya Hime did not want to marry any of the princes, and so she assigned each one a task which she knew was impossible. She promised she would marry whichever prince managed to complete this task. For the first prince, she instructed him to bring her the stone begging bowl of the Buddha in India. She told the second to bring her a jeweled branch on the legendary island of Horai. The third, she demanded the robe of the fire rat of China. The fourth, she sent to find a precious jewel from the neck of a dragon. The fifth, she told to bring her a cowrie shell born of swallows. The first prince knew the task was impossible and attempted to deceive Kaguya Hime with a bowl that resembled the one she'd asked for. She saw that it was fake and dismissed him. 2 other princes tried to deceive Kaguya Hime and were summarily dismissed. Another gave up after encountering tremendous difficulty. The last prince actually died attempting the task. Eventually, the Emperor of Japan himself came to visit the strange beauty and, after seeing how beautiful she was, fell in love with her. He asked her to marry him. Because he was the emperor, Kaguya Hime did not demand a task from him. She simply told him she could not marry him because she was not from the world and would not be able to leave with him to the palace. He accepted this but continued to profess his love for her. That summer, as Kaguya Hime gazed at the full moon, Her eyes filled with tears, and she became inconsolable. Her elderly parents asked her why she was sad. She finally told them she was not from this world and that she must return to the moon to her people. It is believed that the people of the moon sent her to Earth to find care in a mortal couple in order to protect her from the great war in the heavens. The gold which Taketori had found all those years was payment from the people of the moon. The emperor, who was hopelessly in love with Kaguya's Haim, sent his guards to surround her so she could not be taken away. Soon the heavenly people of the moon came to retrieve her. The emperor's guards were dazzled by the strange and bright light. As the people of the moon took her up, she wrote notes of apology and goodbye to her Earth parents. She then took a small taste of the elixir of life and attached it to a letter to the emperor. The people of the moon placed their robes on her, and she instantly forgot her life on Earth and all of her sadness. The parents of Kaguya Haim were overwhelmed with sadness and took to their beds. The emperor later read the note, and he too was overcome with grief. He sent his guards out to the highest mountain with a letter to Kaguya Haim and instructed that it be burned at the top of the mountain so she could read it. The emperor did not wish to live forever, so he also instructed that the elixir of life be poured out at the top of the mountain. The guards carried out these commands, and at the top of Mount Fuji, they burned the letter and poured out the elixir of life. That is how Mount Fuji came to get its name, which means mountain abounding with warriors. Yamato Takeru. The legend of Yamato Takeru is taken from both the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. The importance of this great hero cannot be overemphasized. He is regarded by some as a figure analogous to King Arthur in his heroism and stature. It is believed by some that Yamato Takeru was a historical figure, the son of the 12th Emperor of Japan, and that he lived sometime in the 4th century. Actual historians tend to doubt this. It is believed that historical facts from the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki are at best a blend of fact and fiction designed to create a straight genealogical line from the gods to the actual historical emperors. The legend of Yamato Takeru. Originally named Prince Yamato, Yamato Takeru killed his older brother. His grieving father was afraid of him from then on and banished him to Azuma province, then to the land of Kamaso, to fight of criminals and rebels. Before leaving, Prince Yamato prayed at the shrine of Amaterasu, the Sun Goddess, and asked for her blessings. Since his aunt was a priestess of the Eyes Shrines, she presented him with a silk robe and told him it would work as good luck. He then departed with his wife and few loyal followers for the island of Kaishu to fight rebels and criminals. The emperor hoped that he would defeat the prince by sending him to a certain death. In fact, the prince proved himself a great warrior. He defeated all who resisted him. One particular time, Prince Yamato dressed himself as a woman by wrapping the silk robe around him. He placed a comb in his hair and adorned himself with jewels. In this way, he was able to enter the tent of his enemies during a banquet. At one point, the leader of the band bid Yamato to serve him as a servant woman. In disguise, Yamato approached the man and killed both him and his brother. As the leader lay dying, he asked who the woman was who had destroyed him. As soon as he found out, he named the hero Yamato Takeru, which means the bravest Yamato. The king remained fearful of Yamato Takeru. He ordered him to go fight against the provinces in the east, where there were people who disobeyed the imperial authority. After defeating the rebels in the east, Yamato Takeru encountered an outlaw rebel named Izumo. Yamato Takeru knew he had to outsmart the outlaw in order to beat him, so he befriended Izumo for a time. Izumo invited Yamato Takeru to go swimming. While Izumo was in the water, Yamato replaced Izumo's sword with a wooden sword. After they came out of the water, Yamato Takeru challenged him to a duel. Since Izumo was armed only with a wooden sword, Yamato Takeru easily defeated him. With this, he was welcomed at the imperial palace as a conqueror and a hero. The king threw a lavish feast in his honor. Soon after this, Yamato was ordered to defeat another rebellion. This time, the Amishi uprising in the east. Like before, he went to pray to the Sun Goddess. His aunt again gave him a magic gift. This time she gave him the great sword named Kusanagi no Tarugi, which once belonged to the gods. This is the sword discovered by Susanoo, the brother of the Sun Goddess Amaterasu. This was the sword which Shizuna used to defeat the eight-headed serpent in ancient times. His aunt also gave him a bag of flints for striking fire. While Yamato Takeru was in the province of Suruga, he was invited to go on a deer hunt. While out on the hunt, Yamato noticed flames surrounding him in the tall grass. A bushfire was approaching him. The flames and smoke were close to cutting off his route of escape. He then remembered the flints his aunt gave him, and he quickly struck them at the grass nearest him. At the same time, Yamato swung the great sword, Kusanagi, and cut the high green blades of grass which cut a path for him to escape. At that moment, a great wind blew the flames away from him. Yamato realized that the Amishi tribesmen had trapped him. After he fled a near certain death, the sword was named the Grass-Cleaving Sword. Yamato Takeru then ventured further east after defeating the Amishi rebellion. He won many victories along the way. During one episode, his princess threw herself into the sea as a sacrifice to assuage the wrath of the gods. Yamato Takeru would go on to defeat a great serpent in the mountains, which was terrorizing people and devouring them. He destroyed the serpent by twisting his arms around it. Though stung by the evil creature, he survived. Prince Yamato Takeru also wrote the first Renga poems revered in Japan. After all of his conquests, he died of a disease that is believed to be the result of a local god he had cursed in his youth. Upon his death, he was transformed into a white plover. Prince Yamato Takeru is revered as a great hero in Japan to this very day. Chapter 7. Contemporary versions of Japanese mythology. Since so many of the myths and legends of Japan still resonate with the Japanese people, many of these ancient tales have found a new life in contemporary culture. Anime, manga, and video games have made good use of the fantastic stories of ancient Japan. It should come as no surprise, the myths and tales we have covered should be found in modern comics and cartoons. The fantastic, terrifying, and beautiful magic which attends so much of the lore of Japan makes an easy transition to animated tales of wonder. At the same time, since so much of this mythology is still a part of the modern imagination in Japan, the tales are easily identifiable for modern readers. The Kojiki has been brought to life in the form of manga. There are versions which have fully animated the text, and others which are more like graphic novels. The degree of faithfulness to the original varies, as some authors and illustrators have been more interested in the terrifying battles and trips to hell than the spirituality found in the book. In any case, the Kojiki has been a fruitful source for many of the most popular animated versions of Japanese mythology. There are entire scholarly studies on this subject alone. Yokai have provided the manga and video game industries with endless fodder for their monsters and heroes. Shuten Doji is brought back to life in a manga series in which he takes on the characteristics of a superhero, although his status as a demon and destroyer is never far away. The sheer number of manga series which co-opt the yokai are too numerous to enumerate. One important source for much of the contemporary retelling of Japanese mythology and folklore is the collection of Yakushima tales. This collection brings together a number of myths and legends which sprung from an actual place in Japan. The island of Yakushima holds a legendary status in Japan. It is nearly a perfect circle at the southern end of the country. Filled with lush forests and hidden spaces, Yakushima is precisely the type of place we associate with magic and myth. Of all the tales which sprung from the Yakushima tales, undoubtedly the most famous is the story of Princess Mononoke. This story was adapted for a highly successful film produced by the nearly equally legendary Studio Ghibli and directed by Hayao Miyazaki in Japan. It was dubbed into English and enjoyed a successful run the world over. The origin of the tale lies in the Yakushima myths and legends. The story of Princess Mononoke involves a battle between the forces of the newly emerging modern weapons and machines against the gods and enchantments of the forests of Yakushima. Mononoke is not a proper name, but the name of forest spirits. The same spirits believed to inhabit Yakushima, as Prince Ashitaka learns to negotiate the different realms of the spirits and the humans who seek to utilize the resources of the forests. The conflicts between these two realms intensifies. The battles between the spirits, led by the great wolf goddess, and the humans who encroach upon the mystical forests, is in many ways a tale of the clash between old and new Japan. As we saw in the earliest tales and myths of Japan, virtually everything in nature was animated and enchanted with some form of god or spirit. As Japan moved into the modern era, as the mechanization of its world took over these customs and beliefs, the powers of these myths lost their force. With the contemporary versions of Japanese mythology we see in films such as Princess Mononoke, we perhaps see the resurgence of the power of Japanese myth in contemporary Japanese culture. These myths and legends still carry a great deal of power in modern life, and the massive success of this film proves that fact. The myths, legends, and folk tales of Japan are numerous. Japan is an ancient culture, and the mythological stories which date back to times before writing are murky and mysterious. Every region of Japan has its own myths and legends which animate sacred places, and even individual homes. The Japanese tradition of worshipping ancestors offers a world of legend and myth itself. Looking only at those ancient texts, the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, we can see that there is a world of things to study. The two books overlap in many ways, but each offers its own version. As with all texts that have come down through the ages as sacred, scholars have made much of even the smallest differences. Those who study and practice the Shinto religion, which was eventually shaped by these ancient texts, will find a reason to split hairs over the minute differences between the two books. The yokai are another topic of Japanese mythology which can be a lifetime study. There is such a wealth of varieties of yokai. Some of the yokai are specific to certain parts of Japan. These also have given scholars and interested readers an inexhaustible supply of things to explore. We looked at the three most evil yokai because these are viewed as having a pernicious influence on the history of Japan. Whether one sees these things as true or not, they are the mythological causes of a significant disruption in Japanese civil society. Shuten Doji seems to be the primary culprit for the crumbling of imperial Japan. Fairy tales are found the world over. Japan is now different on this account. Like the fairy tales we see in just about every part of the world, the fairies of Japanese mythology are hard to figure out. They are mischievous, helpful, evil, terrifying, beautiful, everything one would imagine about fairies. They play the same role in Japanese society as they do elsewhere. They offer cautionary tales as well as stories of wonder. Finally, the Japanese value their heroes. There's a wealth of mythology in this realm as well. Just looking at Yamato Takeru, we can wonder how many versions of this story must be in circulation. There is a resurgence of interest in the mythology and folklore of Japan. This swell of interest is obviously flourishing in Japan, but it has found an audience and readership around the globe. The old yokai provide a wealth of material for manga and anime. There are now entire shelves of manga books available which makes use of the yokai legends. These spirits and demons are brought to life like never before with the talented illustrators and storytellers who bring these books to the world. Again, the readership for these books is global. As it turns out, Japanese mythology strikes a chord with people around the globe. Anime and video games can bring the old legends to life in ways no one could imagine in times past. These media animate and reimagine stories from as far back as the Kojiki. The powers of those founding gods and goddesses can be brought to life and rendered in an interactive form in these new and emerging media. Films such as Princess Mononoke have brought the mythology of ancient Japan to the world on a grand scale. The success of this film alone is unprecedented, and the entire source for this film comes from the magical and mythical island of Yakushima. We can provisionally draw two conclusions from the success of this film. The ancient myths and legends of Yakushima are alive and still carry tremendous force, even for the modern imagination. And the mythology of Japan remains an inexhaustible realm even to this day. Our modern world, so dominated by technology, remains driven by the myths and legends of old. Underneath our sense of sophistication, we are still just as enchanted by gods and goddesses, serpents and wolves, magical creatures, both evil and good. Deep within us is the same sense of wonder at the world as those eyes and ears which recorded the Kojiki.